Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, Europe will need more and more batteries to reach our goal of climate neutrality.
As you can see, a new industry is being born here.
The most innovative, long-lasting and clean batteries will soon be made in Europe.
I was very excited because they say make oil history. Okay, it is a nice mission. I wanted to be part of this one.
But Europe still relies massively on batteries that are entirely made abroad.
Regarding the car of the future, the electric car, Asian companies are ahead of the pack, especially when it comes to batteries.
We must have that technological European sovereignty.
The European response to this dominance is Northvolt, Europe's largest battery factory.
To remain dependent on the Asian technology, as is the case today, cannot be the option.
When I arrived, yes, atmosphere was positive. Many people, many employees is coming like me. 100.
Northvolt is bringing tens of thousands of new residents to the town.
Everybody was proud.
The Northvolt factory is due to begin mass production of batteries in 2021, with the aim of 500,000 batteries leaving the factory every year.
But just 3-4 months later, everything is changed. I applied to Northvolt as a maintenance planner. They called me just a few days later, maybe next day, I don't remember exactly. Signature contract in just 1-2 weeks maximum, complete everything. So I feel very happy. I collect my luggage. Yes, I was proud.
Working for Northvolt?
Yes, exactly. When you come to Northvolt, many people start to understand something is going wrong. This is not a secret. First, I was thinking, okay, Ismail, you don't know this battery technology right now, and I never work in this type of huge factory. I was thinking, Ismail, be relaxed, be calm. I asked some friends. They told me, oh, don't worry, this is Northvolt. Every 6 months, every 1 year, managers change, organization structural change. They told me, don't worry, this is startup, end of month, you will receive your money on time, don't worry. But then we receive one meeting invitation, everybody. And everybody understands something is going wrong. This is not for good news. And yes, it was a very sad day for Northvolt. Very, very sad day.
Battery maker Northvolt is closing.
Europe's largest battery manufacturer, Northvolt, has gone into administration,
which is said to be the biggest bankruptcy in modern Swedish history.
One of the problems at Northvolt was that in the end, the battery cells didn't meet required quality standards. The reject rate was too high, and the whole process simply took too long. People thought Northvolt had once been too big to fail, and that dream was over. Highly complex processes mean the failure rate in battery production is generally very high. You start with a relatively wet product known as a slurry. This is an electrode paste, which is applied to an electrode foil and then dried. Individual electrode sheets are then punched and cut from this film, and these are then stacked in several layers. Finally, once this stack is ready, it's inserted into the housing. Then it's filled with the electrolyte solution and sealed. The cell is then active, ready for use, and can be charged and discharged. And then you can see how it behaves. That's what makes battery production so unique. It involves a large number of steps, each with very different physical or chemical processes. A gigafactory like this involves a large number of stages and pieces of equipment that you might not have developed yourself, which makes it hard to understand why my cells are now scrap.
Northvolt was Europe's biggest hope. But in 2025, the company filed for bankruptcy. The failure isn't an isolated case. The gigafactory map of Europe, at first glance, it appears to symbolize a new era, with plans for new battery factories everywhere. Europe was finally seeking its independence. But today's reality looks different. Europe's battery industry isn't being developed by Europeans. The dominant actors come from South Korea and, more than ever, from China. These Chinese manufacturing giants mean business. And Europe's dreams are being dashed. Northvolt, once the flagship project, has failed. Other projects are being put on hold or abandoned altogether, leaving the continent locked in a new entrenched dependence.
Good morning to all our visitors and exhibitors, and welcome to IAA Mobility 2000.
High-tech flex in Munich. At the International Motor Show, Chinese manufacturers are out in force and show who's calling the shots. Chinese batteries are in everything, including European e-cars. Viable alternatives? In short supply. But researchers like Jessica Schmid still have hope.
I think the battery is a crucial component for our future, but unfortunately, we're currently very, very dependent on Asian companies.
So you're also working on semi-solid and solid-state batteries?
Yeah, actually, if there is some high-end vehicles for the cathode, we use the NCM. Mass production will be 2027 for Gulsunar.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow, amazing.
They probably got started with it all around 2015 to 2020 because there weren't any electric cars from Europe back then. They got on with it and implemented it relatively quickly. They had a clear agenda and just put it into practice, with no wavering or backtracking on anything. And we kind of missed the boat. It's very evident here, unfortunately. It was simply that time advantage that made all the difference.
Chinese global market leader CATL is making its mark. The group is expanding right here in Europe, building huge factories in Hungary, Spain, and Germany.
CATL, if I had to describe the scale or magnitude of it, it feels surreal. When you're inside a CATL factory, it's so enormous, it seems to go on forever. It's just one of many factories like this all over the world. Truly impressive. They have complete control over the market, from materials through to prices. That's why we need to be developing our own batteries in Europe. And now we've got to make up for lost time. There's still a lot to do. We need new solutions, new approaches, because otherwise, at some point, there may be no way back.
The competition is overwhelming. Northvolt has gone bust. What's still a viable path for European companies now?
technically Northvolt was not ready. Because when you can install something in your university or in your research department, you can do like this, but no. When you try to make it scale up in huge factory, very huge gigafactory in Skellefteå, it does not mean it will work perfectly. I was thinking if something is going wrong, many people has so much hope from Northvolt. They come here, they establish new life, they bring their families and they bought apartments or houses. They invest their whole life to Northvolt. So I decided to send one email to our CEO, Peter Carson. I write to him, I say, this company has this type of problems. You are focusing to scale up like a crazy, but you are not focusing to battery producing here. Problem is scrap. Many thousands, hundreds of thousands batteries going to scrap because they cannot pass the quality control. Europe has manufacturing knowledge, but it is in theory, not in practice, not like a China.
The high volume of industrial waste was one reason why Northvolt eventually collapsed under the weight of billions of dollars of debt.
As soon as a machine needs to be inspected again or readjusted, all subsequent process steps are also put on hold. Shutting down an entire gigafactory like that, even for just a day or half a day, means enormous losses. It's such a complex industry, it can't be managed without partners. And because the Chinese have been involved in it for such a long time, it's very important to work with them.
Will this give Europe a second and perhaps final chance?
We're here at the VW plant in Salzgitter, where we're setting up our first battery cell factory in partnership with VW's subsidiary PowerCo and VW itself. The infrastructure, the building, has now been completed. The clean and dry rooms are up and running, at the end of the hot commissioning phase. Hot in the sense that we're running the machines using actual material to fine-tune them, resolve any remaining issues, and of course produce samples in the process. With complex machines like these, it's not a case of plug and play. You don't just install them and everything works straight away, especially with the sensitive products we're working with here.
PowerCo aims to minimize startup risks. To this end, it's relying on close partnerships with Chinese giants. They supply tried and tested expertise for the plants and cell design.
Because a cell is simply concentrated energy which just burns out, then we've got a big problem. In the worst-case scenario, if an electrically conductive particle of a certain size ends up inside the cell, then that can cause a short circuit. That's why we use clean and dry rooms. The clean room reduces the risk of particle contamination. The dry room takes as much moisture out of the air as possible, because we don't want either in the cell. We make the electrode. It's about as thick as a hair and relatively delicate. The machine has to be set up precisely and aligned to the micrometer so that nothing's out of place, to prevent it from snapping, which would halt the process and leave us with scrap.
The plan? PowerCo is buying Chinese technology, but not dependence. Unlike with joint ventures, it retains the know-how and full control over the factory.
The manufacture of battery cells used in electric cars is currently based in Asia. They've got the expertise to manage the whole process on a large scale, and we need to build that up here too. Sourcing tried and tested equipment from Asia is giving us the foundation to be able to produce in the same way. But close cooperation with our suppliers is essential, because in practice, problems arise that we can't always predict.
In Salzgitter, the production ramp-up was initiated in late 2025. Is Europe's ambition to achieve battery sovereignty still realistic? The PowerCo plant is the blueprint for the future.
Several potential buyers are interested in acquiring the insolvent battery manufacturer Northvolt. International companies have expressed interest.
One more big problem. If this Chinese company don't support Northvolt, Northvolt cannot work even 1 week. Because they don't know these machines. Because you don't know how they are working. And then these companies send many workers. If they don't support Northvolters, they cannot make manufacturer. This was the biggest problem in Northvolt. This is most important point. If we, as a Europeans, if we try to buy equipment from China, China never will give us best products.
Around 5,000 workers, including over 1,000 from outside the EU, are facing an uncertain future. Basically,
and then I started to search job.
Trip up to Skellefteå. What's the mood like up there?
It was very hard, very, very hard.
In the face of Sweden's biggest bankruptcy, our community feels very much left on its own.
There's no country in the world today with a functioning battery production industry where the state hasn't stepped in to provide financial support.
I think we have been in quite a very turbulent times for the past 8 years. First, we have this dramatic upwards of the city, and then we have the message of the bankruptcy. If you had come here 1.5 years ago, you had found me struggling to find accommodation for the people that has moved here. And now we have all these empty flats. We knew that batteries is a strategic product, not to say the least today, in these turbulent times. It was quite hard, of course. But I think, nevertheless, in these times, we continued to have this dialogue on the EU level and the national level to make solutions for the people that lost their jobs.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends,
our companies are falling behind on key strategic technologies, like batteries.
We cannot afford to create new dependencies.
The gigafactories are in a bind. Orders are scarce and production has stalled.
And it's very clear it's now time for action.
Why this fierce battle over battery production? Because the battery cell is the new heart of mobility. It's by far the most expensive and most important component of an electric car. The battery pack represents up to 40% of the total manufacturing cost and value added. Companies that don't make their own batteries relinquish control over the most vital element of their product and become heavily dependent on geopolitical vagaries. Without its own cell production, Europe's key industry, the automotive industry, risks becoming an extended workbench, an assembly line for technology developed and controlled in Asia. This also puts jobs at risk. At the Battery Production Days 2025 conference, the European battery industry is seeking future-proof solutions.
So now I switch to English because our next speaker, and you will give your talk about perspectives on setting up battery cell manufacturing in Europe. Dear George, thank you very much that you are here. The stage is yours.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, thank you everyone. So what are the challenges when we try and build a gigafactory in Europe? It's no secret that deploying battery factories is a very expensive game. It really isn't cheap, and it's not easy to raise that kind of capital, especially in today's climate. And again, I don't think there is a particularly perfect answer to this question. So Europe, has a job and needs to innovate to not only catch up, but also overtake what's available globally.
What do you think needs to happen in order to improve the whole situation?
I think that we have this tendency in the West of looking for quick returns on things. Batteries are quite a long game. You just can't get into a battery industry very quickly and try to develop something and make a bunch of money off it and then get out of it. It's not really suited to that.
While China and the US pour billions into their industries, Brussels is hesitant, allocating just under 7 billion euros to the sector to date. The same amount invested by CATL in its Hungary plant alone.
We're not getting anywhere. We're discussing the wrong issues.
I believe Europe itself needs to set a clear course of action.
Politically, what's needed now is someone who has a plan, can implement it, and develop a vision for Europe.
There are funding schemes, but securing that money is a challenge.
Another chance we're missing. How many more will there be?
From where we are now, we won't be able to start making the best battery cells. We need to be realistic and admit that maybe we're only third best. But we can't give up. This is too important.
At this point, the only way to make rapid progress is precisely through these partnerships. I think if we completely cut ourselves off and say we'll do it all on our own, it'll be very difficult and take even longer than it already has. Electric mobility will prevail, or is in the process of doing so. We can't waste any more time, and that's why this is the best option for us moving forward.
Many are now looking to PowerCo, maybe Europe's last chance. In late 2025, shortly before the ramp-up, the mood is tense.
The ramp-up is about scaling up the whole operation to meet customers' demands, thereby enabling them to build up capacity and producing large numbers of cells. And of course, the more cells I produce, the cheaper it becomes.
Chris Meyer is battling over every micrometer. Scrap levels can't be too high.
We are prepared for that because we ordered 6 more coils, which will arrive today.
Of course, not everything went to plan. Setting up a clean and dry room like this is a challenge, even for this company. We've learnt a great deal about how to set them up and interlink the various sections.
And yeah, that would be my overview of the current situation.
You certainly need tenacity. Giving up isn't an option. Working together is essential. Not against each other, but together.
But even before mass production began in 2026, parent company VW slashed PowerCo's budget from an initial 15 to well below 10 billion euros. Months earlier, PowerCo and its partners issued an open letter to the European Commission calling for massive financial support and warning that otherwise the European battery industry would be doomed.
5 months after its bankruptcy, a buyer has been found for Sweden's beleaguered battery manufacturer.
American battery manufacturer Lighton is acquiring the assets of bankrupt company Northvolt. The purchase price is not being disclosed. However, the deal was sweetened with discounts and the opportunity to enter the European market.
Of course, it was fantastic news. I think it was fantastic news for Skellefteå, the people that lived here, for Sweden, and I think it was also fantastic news for Europe. We feel good about that they have also employed the former management, and I think they solved a lot of problems with Northvolt and the production this spring in producing batteries, so I think that is really one good thing. What's now it's how to connect with all these people that has been in the factory and that has have to leave the factory because of the regulations and so on.
But the most difficult part is now when they have to recruit new employees and have to start production again and make sure that they don't do the same mistakes that Northvolt did and make sure that they can produce batteries with profit.
It's going to be a bumpy road ahead, of course. We never know how this will end, but I think it's right now we feel quite hopeful.
A US startup buys up the remnants of the European dream. But Lighton is a risk. A factory of this scale is uncharted territory, even for the Americans.
So you found another job?
Yes, I am feeling a little bit lucky for this one. Now I have a new job and I am happy. Just 2 months later, I started to my new job. I am a project manager for power grids, smart grids. We are installing high voltage lines. It is a very nice project and company also very, very nice. They are very helpful for me.
For Ismail, the battery saga is well and truly over. His faith in Europe's ambition crushed. Can entrepreneurs like Northvolt's former CEO turn things around?
I don't think Europe politicians has a plan for battery sector. They are only expecting one more Peter Carson for find some money and install new gigafactories. If Europe cannot produce their technology, always have to buy from Chinese non-stop.